We are entering into the second week of the 2024 US Open, and although the controversy surrounding Jannik Sinner's failed doping tests appears to have died down a bit, it seems to me that many players and fans were left unsatisfied with how the whole thing played out.
I cannot control the player's reaction. In my mind, I know that I haven't done anything wrong. I had to play already months with this in my head.
I touched on the subject a bit last week, but then I noticed that opinions were split down the middle, and there was some pushback because I didn't really go into the situation extensively. I spent more than half of the video on the Cincinnati Open recap, and barely spent a couple minutes covering the Sinner situation. You guys probably wanted a more robust answer, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break down both sides of the argument in the simplest way possible. No BS, no biased arguments, just the undisputed facts. It's February 12th, 2024. Umberto Ferreira, who was Sinner's fitness coach at the time, purchases a medical spray with the brand name Trofodermin. This product is available over the counter and doesn't require a prescription, so Ferreira gets it in Bologna, Italy. Fast forward to March 3rd at Indian Wells in California. Giacomo Naldi, who's Sinner's physiotherapist, gets a cut on his little finger on his left hand while trying to reach for a scalpel in his equipment bag. The cut begins to bleed, and Naldi wraps a bandage around it. Witnesses give conflicting answers on where and when the cut occurs, and Jannik Sinner isn't aware of the cut until he sees a bandage. He asks Naldi if he's used anything to treat it. Naldi says no. 2 days later, Naldi removes the bandage, and fitness trainer Ferreira, who traveled with the Trofodermin spray from Italy to the United States, recommends the spray to help with the healing. Now, there's a clear anti-doping warning on the Trofodermin canister of spray. However, it's already been removed from its packaging. Why? Oh, and by the way, Ferreira, the fitness trainer, is also a qualified pharmacist who's expected to know about the medication. Naldi says that Ferreira didn't give him any anti-doping warning and that he had no idea that the spray contained clostebol and that he didn't read the label. Ferreira argues that he gave Naldi a clear warning about its use. Jannik Sinner isn't aware of the situation. Meanwhile, Naldi uses the spray from March 5th to March 13th in his ensuite bathroom. During this period, he gives full-body massages with oils every day for an hour to an hour and a half or so without gloves. Naldi applied 2 sprays of the product on his hands and performs foot exercises to help Sinner with an ankle injury on March 10th. Sinner, on the other hand, has a medical condition called psoriasiform dermatitis, a condition that causes itching, which leads to scratching and small cuts. Naldi can't remember if he washed his hands in between applying the spray to his finger and massaging Sinner. That evening, Sinner submits 2 urine samples, a primary one and a corroborative one, and both test positive for clostebol. Okay guys, let's pause here and address this part. Physiotherapists may have different relationships with their players and may not give massages with gloves on a normal day. But if you know you have a cut somewhere, it's not that hard to wear a glove to prevent the exchange of body fluids. More so, Naldi is supposed to be a top professional who understands these things because you could easily expose a player to bloodborne infections and put their health at risk. For Ferreira, who's a fitness trainer and pharmacist himself, he should have known better not to bring the spray anywhere near the team in the first place. I should also mention that the 33-page document revealed that there were discrepancies between the date that Ferreira said he got the medication and the available bank statements that were presented. Assuming the story is true, it appears to me that Sinner was badly let down by his team. But also seeing that there were some inconsistencies between Ferreira and Naldi, at the end of the day, some fans might lean toward what Taylor Fritz had to say about the situation. Here's a snippet of what Fritz says.
Everyone's going to have their own opinion, but it's pretty irrelevant at the end of the day because the truth of the matter is always going to be between him and his team.
This is the first part of the discussion. It's assumed that every player is responsible for what goes into their bodies. However, when these players hire top-level professionals, they sort of transfer some of that burden to these professionals, depending on the details of their contracts. But moving on to the next part. It's now March 18th, and ahead of the Miami Open, Sinner submits another urine sample. It also comes back positive for clostebol. We're now in April, and Sinner has been notified of the Adverse Analytical Finding, or AAF, which comes with an automatic provisional suspension. But Sinner and his legal team respond that same day with an urgent application for the ban to be lifted, and it is lifted the following day. 2 weeks later, on April 17th, the second AAF pops up, and Sinner responds with yet another urgent application. This time, the ban is lifted on the 20th. At this point, Sinner is extremely fortunate that neither of his short-lived provisional bans falls on a tournament week. A month later, on May 30th, the International Tennis Integrity Agency, or the ITIA, charges Sinner with anti-doping rule violations. And about 3 weeks later, on June 19th, Sinner's legal team submits detailed explanations about what went down. Sinner is then cleared of any wrongdoing on August 20th. However, he forfeits his prize money and ranking points from Indian Wells. So, why was Sinner still allowed to compete? The answer can be simplified in a way. He was suspended twice, but appealed against those bans with the argument that he was inadvertently exposed to clostebol. The fact that Sinner was able to file an appeal that same day could just mean that his legal team was on top of their game. However, there are also rumors that he might have been given an advanced warning before being formally notified, but like I said, I'm not going to fuel any rumors or speculation. Now, a total of 10 in-depth interviews were conducted by the ITIA's investigators, and they also sought the advice of 3 anti-doping experts. An independent tribunal also reviewed the details of the case, and what did they conclude? That Sinner bore no fault and no negligence of his own. In assessing whether a player is at fault, the ITIA considers the steps that the player takes to make sure they don't get contaminated. In Sinner's case, he hired experts and tried to double-check with Naldi if he used anything for the cut. This, alongside many other reasons, factored in the decision to free Sinner from any fault, because he couldn't have suspected that he was getting contaminated despite his own best efforts. Now let's talk about the levels of clostebol that were detected in Sinner's urine. The concentration in the first sample was 121 picograms per milliliter, which was adjusted to 86 picograms per milliliter under normal specific gravity. The second sample had a similar concentration of 122 picograms per milliliter, this time adjusted to 76 picograms per milliliter. This is how performance-enhancing drugs and their metabolites are measured. The 1/1000th of a gram argument is misleading, holds no water, and unfortunately oversimplifies everything to the layman. This then leads to false assumptions because that's not how the concentration of PEDs or their metabolites are even measured in the first place. 1/1000th of a gram in what quantity of urine? See the problem? Basic biology also tells us that when substances get into our bodies, most of the time they go through a series of processes before getting discharged completely. While the quantity found in Sinner's urine at the time wasn't deemed effective enough to cause any kind of performance enhancement, you can't argue with all certainty that the levels could not have been higher than what was in his body. Also, for detectable systemic absorption, it's likely that the steroid got into Sinner's body through open skin cuts rather than transdermally through his skin. I did come across a research paper which brought up cases of athletes being contaminated with certain steroids via lip balm, a simple massage, and even through sexual contact. But there was a gross lack of further studies on the subject of contamination with clostebol specifically. Let's pump the brakes here and again address the question. Did Sinner bear any negligence or fault? Personally, I think that it's possible that Sinner genuinely didn't know, but that's only an opinion, not an argument. I definitely am not speaking for everyone here, but the trend that I noticed is that more and more people were critical of the entire process and not necessarily the player. This led to talks of preferential treatment. But as you might already know, Jannik Sinner isn't the first person to have successfully appealed the suspension. Recently, 33-year-old Marco Bortolotti, an Italian player ranked around 400, found himself in a similar situation. He said he experienced hell for months and was sympathetic towards Sinner. Back in 2023, after a challenger event in Lisbon, Bortolotti provided an in-competition urine sample which contained a metabolite of clostebol. Bortolotti was then notified of the outcome, but was eligible to continue playing until February, when he was found not guilty or negligent. Just like Sinner, Bortolotti immediately provided an explanation, which the ITIA accepted after seeking scientific advice. It took just 8 days for the agency to conclude on February 7th that Bortolotti bore no fault or negligence of his own. Oh, and I should mention that the nature of his explanation was also redacted in the ITIA's final decision. The reality here is that a lower-ranked player who also found himself in a similar situation also had his case resolved. Also, the fact that clostebol is notorious when it comes to doping might have played a huge role in Sinner being able to avoid suspension because it was very easy for them to identify and verify the source of contamination. For some of the other athletes, it might have taken them a little longer to find the source of contamination. And I should also mention that in the last 4 years alone, 38 Italian athletes have tested positive for clostebol specifically. But I know this doesn't answer all the questions about preferential treatment, so let's dig a bit further. One of the reasons I think some fans feel like there are double standards is because most of us haven't always been familiar with the complex anti-doping rules. In the past, every player seemed to be guilty until proven innocent, depending on the case. These players were immediately hit with lengthy suspensions and appeal processes. Now, I'm not sure who to blame here for the lack of clarity of the rules before now. The ITIA? Tennis organizations? Because just looking at the hot takes from both professional players and fans tells you that even the players themselves haven't always been sure of what's in the rulebook. And I don't think that's ideal. There should be some basic understanding of the existing protocol, just the same way you should stay on top of your hydration game with SuckerPunch, our channel's presenting sponsor. I've been starting to take my tennis more seriously again, and this has come with doing the dreaded workouts of running, fitness, and on-court training all stacked in the same day. I've been using the hydration shots from SuckerPunch to get through the training, and it totally works, preventing cramps and keeping me on court for hours. They're offering an amazing 28% discount if you use the code Courtside-Punch at checkout. I'll leave the link for you down below. Thanks so much to SuckerPunch for partnering with us. Okay, back to the video. Sinner has since parted ways with his physio Naldi and Ferreira the fitness trainer. However, Naldi didn't seem to be too pleased with how the whole thing played out. He put up this post on Instagram, probably feeling a bit screwed over. And fans have tried to attach different meanings to what the post was all about. But how does this whole thing affect Sinner's reputation moving forward? One thing we can't dispute is that he's handled the whole situation with grace and class, and that has to be commended. Also, he hasn't necessarily shied away from answering questions about the failed doping tests either. The Italian says although it hasn't been easy, he's getting a lot of support from friends and family.
The response from fans, I feel like it has been great. Also throughout when the news came out, in the practice sessions, there was a lot of support, which I'm very glad and happy about that.
But what do the top players make of the situation? Francis Tiafoe didn't want to dwell too much on the subject. Here's what he said.
Governing bodies made a decision. They went and did that. And he's cleared to play. That's pretty much what I have to say about it.
However, Fritz made an important point which I agree with. Here, take a listen.
I think a lot of people get banned for unfortunate reasons, and I guess in this ruling they've found that it's different, and there's no ban, and I trust that he wasn't at fault. It should be consistent across the board with bans and who gets banned, who doesn't get banned, who gets suspended, doesn't get suspended.
We all know that no two cases are the same, but the truth is that the rules haven't always been so clear for everyone to know. One good thing about Sinner's case is that players and fans now have a better idea of how this whole thing works. Djokovic also weighed in on the situation and also suggested that the entire process be standardized moving forward.
These kind of instances are the very reason why we founded PTPA, that is always advocating for fair protocols, clear protocols, for standardized approaches to this kind of cases. And I understand that the frustration of the players is there because of lack of consistency. Hopefully the governing bodies of our sport will be able to learn from this case and have a better approach for the future. I think collectively there has to be a change.
Carlitos also had an interesting answer when asked about Sinner, which some fans might have misinterpreted.
It is complicated. I'm not gonna lie, it is complicated. I believe in a clean sport, so I don't know too much about that. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of things that we don't know, inside the team or inside, everything. But if they said he's innocent, so that's all I know, and that's all I can talk about.
True to his reputation as someone who gives one of the best interviews, Medvedev recently talked about the case, and here's what he said.
I hope that this situation can be the same for every player, like every player can defend himself, because I think what he did was within the rules. It's just the rules are a little bit vague, etc. Imagine, so he knew what happened, and good for him, so he managed to defend himself. Imagine whatever tennis player in the top 100 gets an email and they say, look, there was cocaine in your blood. And you come to them and you say, well, I never did anything in my life. I don't know how did it get there. And when you don't know, you get suspended.
These are my takeaways from the whole situation. I think we shouldn't be too quick to pronounce judgment on players because it's highly likely that we don't know every single thing that went on behind the scenes. What we can do is make arguments from both sides based on the knowledge available, and then compare before coming to our own conclusions. Secondly, the tennis bodies have set a standard, and it would be nice to see them follow the same approach for every player. In the past, and when I made that Halep video, I was very critical of how many players end up serving more time than they should have, or later prove themselves innocent after initially being condemned. How many times have we seen suspensions reduced or even overturned? Of course, the current system of anti-doping isn't perfect, so if the current cracks aren't fixed now, there might not be future guarantees that wrong suspensions won't happen again. Also, I think everyone's gonna move on soon, and this whole issue will die down, and then we can enjoy tennis like before. While some people might have overreacted, it's also understandable. Of course, Sinner totally understands the situation, which is why he says he'll talk to anyone he has issues with privately if needed.
I cannot control the player's reaction. If I have something to say to someone, I go there privately.
Another question that popped up recently was about Sinner skipping the Olympics. Was tonsillitis the only reason he missed the Olympics, or did the doping situation have a role to play in it? Sinner responded by saying that his decision to skip the Paris Games was purely due to physical reasons.
If I would have had a chance to play, physically, not being ill and being able to compete, I would have been the happiest, I think in that moment.
I find it very unfortunate for Sinner that his career best season so far is coinciding with what some might call a villain arc. He won the Australian Open, reached the world #1 ranking, already has Masters 1000 titles this year, and all that. The spotlight has been on him, and it may remain like that for a while. But Jannik is adamant that his situation brings more clarity despite being tough.
It helped me to see also who my friends are and who are not my friends. Yes, but this is all part of a growing experience.
So far, he's been smacking his opponents in the early round matches at the US Open, and you can already tell that his head is back in the game. He's done a great job not getting distracted by the whole situation. It's definitely going to be hard for me to touch on every single argument about Jannik's doping situation, and honestly, I don't even think it's going to be worth it. But one thing I also want to encourage is for fans not to tear down players with hateful words, despite not agreeing with everything that's played out. I'll admit it, these discussions aren't always comfortable, but I think it's totally wrong to take out frustrations on a player, especially considering that most people have problems with the process and not necessarily the player themselves. From what we've seen on and off the court, Jannik Sinner has been a balanced and level-headed guy, and while that might not mean much when it comes to doping, of course, I think it's always a great idea for us to have arguments in a respectful way that helps us learn from each other. I'll let you guys be the judges on this one. What do you make of Sinner's situation, how the tennis bodies handled it, and the reactions from fans and players? And what does this mean for the tennis world moving forward? We have our Discord channel up and running, and it's the perfect place for you to ask your questions and give your hot takes on all things tennis. In our What's the Deal section, I'll be looking specifically at those questions and incorporating them into our upcoming videos, including a deep dive I have coming up on Naomi Osaka. And as always, let me know if you have any other players you want me to do deep dives on, or any other topics from the tours you want covered. Until next time, keep swinging.